All right, guys. I'm here with Sathish Bala, and we're going to be talking about music, startups, and his upcoming festival, Desifest. Satish, what is going on, man?
Woo, what's not going on? Everything is going on, man. I take too much on in life most of the time, and I tell myself I'm gonna, just take what I can eat, and then I take so much more, and so I'm in that phase again where there's literally 100 things happening. I function really well in chaos, and so I think I invite it into my life, and so I'm in my element right now.
Awesome. That's great to hear, man. Let's talk a little bit right now. Start with the beginning. Who is Satish? Where are you from? What got you into where you are right now?
Yeah, let's unpack it. Wow. So I was born in India, but we left when I was, I think, three. So most of my early memories started in Singapore.
Okay.
Um, Singapore in the 80s is not the nicest place to live if you're not Asian. It's just the way the country is and was. And so, I was there till the age of 13. Very harsh life. Unfortunately for me, the entire country labeled me dumb and stupid, and
Uh,
and that's just it's just the way the dice rolled. And my father, being a very strict South Indian man, was crushed. Like my
yeah.
first son, wanted him to be something, doctor, engineer, da da da, and then the country's like, oh, this kid is stupid. He's gonna be a blue collar worker. So the early days weren't that fun. They tried to beat that thing out of me. Stupidness, they tried to beat it out of me without knowing what it was. And then around 13, you have to join the Singapore Army for a year, and everybody has to do it. And so, lucky for us, he had the itch to move again. I think part of it was he wanted to travel, part of it was he wanted to get out of that reality. And
Mhm.
so, whatever the gods may be, blessed us to get to Canada, specifically Toronto, and in a suburb called Scarborough in 1989. And Scarborough in 1989 was the hood.
Yeah.
Like people do not go to Scarborough after dark. Most of the kids there were immigrants or first generation poverty, right? Like immigrants come, they don't have a lot of money,
Mhm.
uh, and I had no idea what any of that was because I'm moving from Singapore, fully structured, segregated. There was wealth and all this kind of stuff, and now I'm in like this hood,
Yeah.
and I'm surrounded by diversity now. Other Indian kids, black folks for the first time, white people, Asian people, and then the subclasses start to happen. Like, what kind of Indian are you, and all of this stuff. And then I discovered basketball,
Okay.
which gave me a great outlet. I discovered music and DJing, which gave me a great outlet. And then that took me to my university. I studied computer science, but I didn't really know what I was going to do with it. I was lucky enough to start my first business when I was in third year university. It's called Spider Designs. We're talking like very early black and white websites, very ugly stuff that just was like phase one, right? And I felt like this is where the future is going to be. Yellow pages are going to be non-existent. Companies will have to go online. So I rolled the dice back then without knowing what an entrepreneur was, to say, hey, let me go and try to find some clients, convince them that they need this thing called the web. And I did pretty good for a student with student loans, and eating crap macaroni and cheese every night.
Yeah.
So that worked out really well. And by the time I graduated, I already had a little micro company, which I then got rid of and evolved into a bigger shop. This was right before Y2K,
Okay.
around 1999. That's when I graduated. And the one course that I paid attention to was COBOL.
Very
And for
good.
some reason, I just liked COBOL more than all the other languages, probably because it was so linear and it made sense versus all the object-oriented programming crap just didn't make sense to me. Um, and Y2K was completely dependent on rewriting COBOL, pretty much
Mhm.
all the old school systems. So all of a sudden, anybody that knew COBOL was minting money. Like companies would just hire us 2, 3, 400 bucks an hour to avoid Y2K. So then I started up my second practice, helping companies with Y2K problems, which then turned into an ERP company. And then we focused on JD AdWords before we got into SAP. And without really planning, by 2006, I had a pretty decent consulting career with a pretty large team. And a lot of my early lessons in entrepreneurship, uh, messing up, living by my gut, getting out of my own limitation, all happened in those years up to 2006. And then after 2006, I got bored because so much of my work was behind the scenes. And I've learned how to sell by this time. I was addicted to selling and storytelling. But if you're in hardcore tech like SAP, JD Edwards, and behind the scenes stuff, you don't get to be creative. You know, I was living in warehouses and manufacturing plants, and there's a side of me that wanted to be creative without knowing what that meant.
Yep.
And then again, you know, right timing, ability to take a risk. Social media was just starting to come out of the woodworks, and agencies were starting to look at, well, how can we now bring social media, digital marketing, and advertising into a tech world? And so I started to look at, well, how can I get into that world? I started a company called Blue Band Media. Back then, media meant media and not, you know, sort of online stuff. And so we're like, okay, let's go in, let's figure things out. I got lucky and got into the CPG world, consumer goods. And my first client was Cheese Strings, and they had a pretty shitty website that had to go live. And, you know, we did it on cost, and got into the industry, and I fell in love with everything about advertising and marketing. And I've always been a storyteller. I've always been passionate about, you know, connecting tech and a user problem so people could sort of benefit from the results. But I didn't know there's something called advertising.
Yeah.
I had no idea that you get paid to whiteboard and come up with ideas and concepts. And, you know, as a kid, obviously I've seen the television commercials and the radio and the print ads, but I didn't know how people came to those things because I was a product guy. And so I was blown away with this opportunity where all of a sudden now I have a company where I get to be techie and nerdy and code and do stuff, but I also get to daydream storytelling and brand design and PR. And because social was just coming up, the 50-year-old industry for advertising had no idea what to do with social media, what to do with digital marketing, didn't know how to run ads. And so even though I came 50 years later after the industry was set up, it was almost an instant baseline when technology came in. And it didn't matter if I didn't know advertising, if I didn't know, you know, storytelling. I knew tech, and they didn't know that. And so, you know, Blue Band, you know, media turned into Blue Band brand, and then Blue Band digital. And over the next 12 years, we became one of the top 5 digital agencies in the country. Over 65 people in Toronto with offices in Costa Rica, China, India, Pakistan. It was great, man. You know, we worked on some incredible brands from McDonald's to NBA, Ford, casinos. Like, it was fantastic. And then around 2017, I was like, you know, time for a change. And we can unpack this later, but I find most of my businesses happen as I need to grow as an individual. And some businesses took, you know, 12, 13 years. Some took a failure or an exit real quick, but all of my business ventures have always been around me coming out of a shell and growing into another version of myself. And at the height of Blue Band, I've grown a lot. I've learned how to, you know, sort of be a different person. And then it became just this repetitive company that didn't have a purpose anymore for me. And so, you know, I created a 2-year exit strategy, tried to become the largest fish in other people's ponds. We stopped working for direct clients and only happened to work with, you know, agency partners. And so we can white label ourselves, but become a big expense line item in their books to a point where they would just go, crap, we're paying these guys so much money, let's just buy them.
Sure.
And that's what happened with one of our suppliers. You know, there's a company called Rivals and Departures, and we met, we chatted, and they said, look, you guys are doing a lot of behind the scene work for us. What would it take to join? And, you know, we came up with a number. It made sense, and I exited. So that was 2017, and then spent a year in 2018, you know, sort of moving things around and making sure the clients were happy. And then I formally exited the agency world at the end of 2018. And then in parallel, in 2006, I started my agency. There was a lot of need for a new platform for South Asian music. You know, the country still only knew Bollywood as the only version. Because I was born in India, but I didn't grow up in India. My representation of the culture was always remixed by the places I lived at.
Yep.
So Indian culture in Singapore was much different than Indian culture in Scarborough. And then you get influenced by hip hop and R&B and house music and Caribbean music. And so for me, the culture was always remixed. And as a new generation of artists like myself, DJs and singers and writers were evolving, there wasn't any opportunity to showcase. We were either, too brown for the
Mm-hmm.
mainstream, so we wouldn't get booked into mainstream festivals or radio or TV, or our own culture looked at us as this black sheep. So
Yep.
they didn't want us either because we're not them anymore. And so, Tupac says a great line, he's like, there's only so long, poor people will knock on the door, and eventually they'll just kick it down to get in. You can't stop them. And I
Mm-hmm.
felt like Desifest had the same sentiment in the early days of, we're going to keep begging for a while, but eventually we're just going to do our own shows.
Yep.
And that's where the Desifest evolved, in 2007 to say, hey, let's put on a show that truly showcases the energy and the passion and the vision of what South Asian culture looks like from a generation that's now the new norm.
Mm-hmm.
We're not our parents' generation. The sentiments and cultural sort of rembrances in it, but really we've remixed it, and that needs a platform. And right time, right place. We hit it off. First year we had about 20,000 people, and now we average just over 50 to 60,000 people a show,
That's
plus
crazy.
an awareness around the square for over 100,000 people. So it's a huge deal. I'm blessed with a great team, and it's our 13th year, and we're a movement, man. Like, it feels good to be able to help shape the scene.
That's
So that's me.
awesome.
That's me.
That's crazy, man. And I love even, and I've known you for years, you are one of the most inspirational yet humble individuals. And I love seeing what you're doing now. And even as you were talking about doing, like, what's the next step? When is it time to step away? Not to walk away, but to kind of step back from this thing and try something new. You're now starting public speaking engagements. Tell me a
Yeah.
little bit about that.
So after I sold the company, my old university, Ryerson, reached out, and they were in the process of setting up a new incubator, and they said, "Do you want to come help out? Because we need more people that have a science background, but when it's a business, because we feel like a lot of our science students don't think they're capable of business.
Mm-hmm.
And whether their business is successful or not, there's some skill sets you learn when you want to be in business, right? Interpersonal skills, ability to storytell, ability to convince somebody of your ideas. These are skills that they don't learn because they're pigeonholed into science. So they're very much research and data collection. And so I said, that's great, man, because those life skills are more important sometimes than the skills you have. Because you could be
Mm-hmm.
the greatest scientist, but if you can't articulate your vision, it's just a piece of science that doesn't get the breathing room to be life-changing or world-changing. So I said, yeah, let me get in. And when I started to do that, my first wave was trying to be like this brand guy, because that's what I thought people wanted me to be. I'm a brand, I build company. Then I realized what they don't care about is my skill sets. What they really cared about is my story and my journey. And I never actually talk about this kind of stuff because I've always thought it's just my own personal scars. Like, who cares? But as I started slowly creating these conversations with these kids about, my own struggle, my fears, battling my dad, going through my first failures and then recovering, I realized there's so much blueprint I have in me from just life that I want to share. And if you don't have a blueprint, well, here's one that you could use, and you can
Mm-hmm.
modify it, change it, own it. And that's really what my speaking gigs ended up becoming, this hope to just share the blueprints that I've created. And if you believe I'm successful, then you can respect the path I took to become successful. And if that path can help you, then we both win, right?
Exactly.
And that's been my belief system. So a lot of the keynotes and speaking that I've been invited to do is around those kind of topics. How do you get past your own fears? How do you build a new version of yourself? What does hustle really mean? What success really mean? Can we be successful and happy? Like, all of these things that I've dealt with as an individual for so many years. I'm working on my first book. Our mutual friend Nelly,
Yep.
that introduced me to. We're 3 chapters deep, and it's been a great process just to learn how to, again, articulate my process into something that other people can digest. And it's all still surreal to me, man, because I've dreamt about living the life that I live now, back in my 20s, But now that I'm living it, it's like, oh man, this is so cool. And I'm learning so much and I'm meeting so many new people. And every time I share, I learn something in return, which empowers me to like just reconstruct my thoughts. And so I'm on a really nice, moment in like my mental health and like life and stuff in general. And so it's been great, man.
That's awesome. It's so cool. This whole panorama of things from tech to entrepreneurship, inspiration, music, and the festival. Give a, since it's coming up soon, give people a little preview. What is Desifest like?
Yeah, so Desifest is a 12-hour nonstop music showcase. Our show happens at Young Dundas Square. If people don't know, go Google it or imagine what Times Square looks like, and that's what Young Dundas Square is in Toronto. And it's in the heart of the city, and we bring anywhere between 20 to 30 different bands. We start at 11 a.m. and we literally go right till 10:59 p.m. And every act brings a mixture of South Asian music and then their own version of whatever their experience is. So if you're a rock band, you've got that South Asian element with a bit of rock and roll. If you're EDM, house, hip hop. But beyond the show itself, which is a great music festival, we have food, we have vendors, we have all of these different touch points that you can come and experience the culture. And it's not just for non-South Asians, but even for the South Asian community. One of the things that's really funny is, we talk about being inclusive, but when you remove the layers, we live in our silos. Muslims live in a certain part of the city. Punjabis live in a certain part of the city. Tamil speakers, so, Tamils and Indians. So we talk about being South Asians, but when we remove the PR layer, we're very much a siloed community, right? Like, not everybody celebrates Diwali because it's a Hindu thing. Not everybody celebrates Eid because it's a Muslim thing. And so, what we wanted to do is create a platform where for at least one day out of the year, we can literally bring every subculture into one area under the umbrella of music, which is hard to sort of debate against because we all listen to the same kind of music. But in those moments, you get to now challenge your stereotypes. If you have preconceived notions of people with turban, well, guess what? For the next 5 hours, you're going to be standing beside somebody with a turban and get to know them, right? If you are misconceived about an artist who's got tattoos on his neck and wears bling, well, here's a young person you can engage with and talk and have a conversation. We found over the last 12 years, the real magic of Desifest is when people come and then over the course of 12 hours, one or a small piece of their bias, whatever it is, preconceived notion, gets a bit of a crack.
Cool.
And then as soon as a crack happens, you start to question all of the other things that you had as a bias, right? Like, most parents come in thinking, okay, most of these artists on stage are broke and probably thugs and do drugs. And then when I introduce the artist, I'm like, yeah, so-and-so is a hip hop artist. He's got a bachelor's in computer science. He runs a startup that's $5 million. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Or, the reason I host the show is I'm equally that kid. You know what I mean? Like, you look at me on stage, I've got, ripped jeans, I got tattoos, I've got a chain, I've got a bling. And I've seen parents go, look, the host, look at this guy, it's probably on stage, being a bum and da da da. My own dad thought that for the longest time. And then you Google me and you're like, okay, successfully built and sold 3 companies, speaks on topics, travels, right? So then I just messed up your belief system. So then what do you do the next time you meet somebody that looks like me? What do you do when you get on the subway and you see a Muslim woman with a hijab on? What do you do when your coworker's got a turban on? All of those things change. And I think for me, Desifest's real value in the last 12 years has been, these moments where we can engage on a different conversation, but the starting point is entertainment. We bring you in for a great show, and then we just hit you with these little moments of like inspiration and questioning and self-doubt, where I think you go home a better person.
Awesome. That's so cool, man. What, besides the festival, what's next for you?
I'm really addicted to figuring out how we can continue to create more opportunities for the community. For 12, 13 years later, we still don't have TV channels dedicated to South Asians. We don't have a lot of newspaper. We don't have a lot of, online bloggers, and we don't have a Huffington Post. We don't have a CNN. So one of my fears now is, how can we be completely transparent if we don't have a voice in the country?
Mm-hmm.
And if the voice that we have is still old school voice from my mom's and my grandparents' generation who don't understand us, then are we being represented properly in helping shape the country? So part of our vision now over the next 6 years is how can Desifest move from being a single platform to become a full multi, 360 platform where we can have a voice on TV, we can have a voice on social, we can have, writers that are young that are writing articles that represent today's challenges.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about teenage, pregnancy and sex. Let's talk about divorce and marriage. Let's talk about artists that are making great moves and not just academics. Let's celebrate South Asian entrepreneurs. I can't name you 5 right now, not because they don't exist,
Mm-hmm.
but because they don't know how to market themselves. We don't know who's in our community. And so my hope for the next 5 or 6 years is use whatever clout I have, whatever brand that I've built and the ability to speak to continue to see if I can help build a platform that gives us a voice. And what's great about that is, when you look at a country like Canada and we want to be diverse, or even North America, one of the hardest things to do is to be fully transparent with other cultures that don't know you. And, some of the world's greatest civil wars happened because communities didn't know each other.
Mm-hmm.
They knew from a propaganda perspective, but they actually never knew each other. And so when I think about my kids' generation, I want them to grow up in a country where love and hate has a purpose. If somebody hates me for the right reasons, that's okay.
Yeah.
Because they hate me for the right reasons, and I have a chance to change you because you're dealing with, perception. Or love me for the right reasons so that we can build a great country together. And so for me, that's the big goal. In doing so, I'm taking smaller steps. We're investing in our own, collective space right now. So, artists can come and create content. We're about to hire a whole bunch of journalists to create a version of Huffington Post for ourselves. We don't know how, but first step, let's get writers. And then step 2, let's start writing. And step 3, set up a $50 WordPress site and see what happens. So we're just making moves, man, without judging, without expecting. Just make moves. Get up, move, get up, move. And, for me personally, building this Sathish brand where I can continue to, sort of spam my vision and purpose into the world is important for me. So I'm learning how to be a better speaker, how to be more passionate and sharing and et cetera. And so, I'm on that path. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and I want to run and start a tech company. I can't tell you the amount of domains I've registered just because I'm like, yes, VR is the next big thing. AI, oh, transportation, oh, okay, set up a domain, set up a site, hire a team. And I'm like, no, because that version served its purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And if I get back into it, then it's really for financial, monetary reasons, and that's not a sustainable business. There's no passion in it. But man, that those mornings when I wake up and I'm just like, am I dreaming all this shit? Like, can I really be a speaker and an international, bestseller and all this? Am I just smoking my own, cannabis, or can it actually happen? And then I'm like, shut up, Sathish. You have a process, you have a blueprint. Here we are, on a podcast, sharing stuff. Let's just keep going. Let's just keep going.
All you got to do is just step out there, and ever since I met you, you've really helped set me on fire in a lot of ways, and I'm glad to be able to bring you to the Sales and Stanzas community. Thank you so much for being on, Sathish.
Yo, I love it, man. So I'm so happy that you invited me, and yeah, there's only a few of us that are shifting and changing and vibrating at a different level, and I'm attracted to that energy, and so you have it. Nelly has it, you know what I mean? And so I'm blessed to be in the company of some awesome people.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Peace.